The committee has considered the Unit Titles Bill and reports it with amendment. Mr Speaker, I move that the report be adopted.
The question is that the report be adopted. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary will say no. The ayes have it. This bill is set down for third reading next sitting day. Call on Government Order of the Day number 3.
Tenancies Amendment Bill interrupted debate on second reading.
When we were last debating this bill, Katrina Shanks was speaking and has 8 minutes 30 seconds remaining if she wishes. Katrina Shanks.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It's my pleasure to continue my call on the Residential Tenancies Amendment Bill tonight. This bill is long overdue to be modernised and to meet the needs of the current environment that we are in. The original Act came in 22 years ago, and the residential tenancies market has undergone significant change in that period. Both landlords and tenants have been keenly awaiting reform to the tenancy laws since the previous government commenced a drawn-out, long-winded review in 2004. This Act is important as it will affect 1/3 of New Zealand households, because 1/3 of our New Zealanders live in rented accommodation, and the private rental housing has a significant impact on the housing in New Zealand, the social and economic outcomes, and much more than it did when this original bill came before the House in 1986. A review of the Act commenced in 2004 and identified 5 primary issues with the current Act: insufficient compliance, enforcement and dispute resolution, lack of knowledge about landlord and tenant rights and obligations, mixed capacity to manage properties and tenants, variable standards of rental housing, and lack of stable tenure for longer-term tenants. So those were the 5 primary issues that a review of this bill, the original bill, was looking at. Mr Speaker, changes to the Residential Tenancies Act have proposed by the previous government as early as 2004, but no tangible progress was ever made. In fact, the sector has been left in limbo for a very long time. This government is focused on progressing modifications to this legislation to actually make a difference, to actually make a change, and to deliver on our promises, to give certainty to a sector that has been waiting for years for amendments to be made to the Residential Tenancies Act. Changes that will make a difference to many people's lives, also our most vulnerable people, because many of our most vulnerable are in renting situations, renting houses, renting flats, and trying to get ahead week by week. This government wants to see landlords being able to manage their investment portfolios in a way that optimises their return and is responsive to demands and responsive to the environment that they're in and responsive to the changes in our economy. But the government also wants to see tenants having access to suitable rental accommodation, being able to make informed choices about where they live, how long they live there, and what they are paying for. So it's got to work for both our tenants and our landlords, this Act, so both can come together and form a renting environment which is healthy for all. We want to see a rental market that is efficient, responsive and well-informed, and this bill goes a long way to delivering that vision. One of the main initiatives in this bill is to provide protections for our vulnerable tenants, those who live in boarding houses. They currently were not covered by the tenancy legislation. Those being our most vulnerable actually fell into a void. This bill brings boarding houses tenancies under the umbrella so that the minimum rights and obligations of people living in boarding house accommodation are clear, adequate and readily enforceable. In fact, I'd also like to thank the officials and the submitters that came forward during this bill during the process in Select Committee. We had many submissions from many groups, many individuals, many NGOs and many landlords in this sector as well. And they all added considerable depth and knowledge to what we were learning in our Select Committee And because of that, many changes were made to the initial bill that came in before the Select Committee to make it a much better bill for all, landlords and tenants alike. Mr Speaker, this was just a short call. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak on this bill tonight.